The modern history knows two methods of scientific research organization: the Western one, market method, and the Soviet administrative one. In Western countries, the scientific elaborations are being ordered when it's considered that their implementation would bring profit. In the USSR, the state was the customer. The state financing allowed scientists to realize the most fantastic projects and hold the foremost positions in the world. Meanwhile, the post-Soviet scientific elite, formed under such hothouse conditions, proved to be unprotected against the market competition when the state budget became unable to support them. As for the Western science, brought up in pragmatic style, it held stably the modern market of the intellectual product.
Мы имели достаточно серьезное.
We had a considerable state financing. Owing to budgetary funds, we could develop our experimental base. Even such a phrase was existent at that time among specialists that the science is, in general, the means to satisfy one's own curiosity at the state expense. And now, to a considerable extent, we are using these surpluses and try to support our science by ourselves, for our own money, creating the certain surpluses which we expect to use in future. But we couldn't say that we appreciate the considerable support of the state. I mean the financial support. If at one time the state financing formed up to 70%, then now it could be 1 or 2%. We are not complaining, really. Ukrainian Zonal Scientific and Research Design Institute of Civil Engineering, which is abbreviated as ZNIIEP, that's the Ukrainian part of the heritage of the Soviet science, which was the pride of our people and the Communist Party and allowed us to keep the parity with the Western civilization. More than 70% of dwelling was erected by standard projects, elaborated namely by this organization. And, in addition, almost 60% of public structures, kindergartens, schools, hospitals. The front of the covered works is impressing. Ideas, researches, projects, and, at last, implementation. The institute was founded in 1963, in the epoch of the flourishing of the greatest achievements of the scientific thought, its brilliant perspectives. All territory of the tremendous country was divided into 6 zones. And the whole complex of scientific research and design works in the field of the civil engineering at the territory, which exceeds a little the territory of Western Europe, was being fulfilled by one zonal institute. In particular, our Kiev Institute was determining the technical policy in Ukraine, Moldova, in the south of the Russian Federation and Kazakhstan. And, in fact, it worked all over the Soviet Union.
Наиболее интересен для нас в конечном смысле.
In the final analysis, the Ukrainian market is of the greatest interest for us. It is closer for us, more capacious, more habitual. Everybody here knows us. The Russian market also is rather interesting. Now we are fulfilling some projects. We elaborated for them the guitar system, which we successfully use now. We are working out systems of quality for them. But we even couldn't compare these two markets as for the volume of orders and the number of customers. Now we are forcing our way to the international market and even fulfilled some contracts with the United Arab Emirates, but it rather bears the exotic character today and cannot be the stable marketing outlet. The technological reorganization at our construction, that's the problem which ripened long ago, and after the creation of the own state became particularly glaring. Organizations and specialists who created the normative legal base of the home industry were concentrated in Moscow and now turn out to be abroad. The history unexpectedly entrusted the Ukrainian architect with the responsibility of the defender of national interests in urban development policy as well as the design of any concrete building. In view of the fact that our customer is not yet civilized and thinks, first of all, about his own interests, the architect must execute functions of a defender of social interests on the whole. That means, to a certain extent, the state interests. And that can be done only when such a normative legal base would be elaborated, which will cover the field of activity of an architect, the customer, the state, the builder, and all participants of the architectural and construction process. The Scientific and Research Testing Engineer Center was created in Kiev Zonal Institute for the purpose of the reduction of terms of the elaboration's implementation into practice in 1970. The main direction of the center's activity is the testing of building materials and products, including the certifying researchers. The object of the particular pride of the center's specialists are two unique testing complexes. The first complex for force and fire testing, the second for natural, climatic and heat physical tests. This equipment enables the user to feel himself more comfortably, taking into account the considerable quantity of foreign systems, which differ substantially from the traditional Ukrainian ones.
Какие системы отличались от традиционных наших систем?
The systems differed from our traditional ones by the presence of the great amount of polymers in the form of the non-extracting falsework made of the expanded polystyrene, which was combining functions of the falsework and the sound and thermal insulation. However, these systems proved to be unstable during fires and, though certified as fireproof, were beneath any criticism. In the Soviet Union, the Institute for a long time was the leading organization in designing for the most complicated engineering and geological conditions, including seismics. The Institute specialists can check the earthquake resistance of the building in laboratory as well as on the field with the help of the special vibrating machine. This machine may simulate the 4th-9 earthquake.
Выполняем все в комплексе. Кто-то может...
We fulfill everything in complex. One can test the reinforcement concrete, the other can test the metal, someone has an opportunity to do only heat physical tests. We do everything to the whole extent. That's why we, all in all, have no problems with the testing of reinforced concrete, metal and timber constructions and materials. Economic difficulties and reduction of the heating norms forced us to pay attention to the dwelling's heat insulation. A new standard of the wall thermal stability was introduced in Ukraine as far back as in 1993. If the Soviet quality system was confined to the mere brick wall with a thickness of 51 centimeters or one layer of the so-called warm concrete in panel dwellings, now such a construction doesn't work at any climatic zone of Ukraine. The brick wall needs the compulsory heat insulation from within. The concrete panel must have 3 layers, where the second layer is the heat insulation. Among the 80 integrated house building factories, which existed in Ukraine in Soviet times, now only few ones work. Those which had an opportunity to adapt their products to new demands. For example, to the demands concerning the thermal stability and tightness of doors and windows. The industry of energy saving in structures has 4 directions. The specialists consider the registration of the consumed heat and the development of non-traditional energy resources to be of great importance, along with the warming of walls, doors and windows and updating of energy supply systems. At least we are learning this from the experience of Western countries, which in the 70s had endured the energy crisis. They have overcome many problems in this field, thanks to interference of states and government leaders. Our leaders at that time didn't respond properly to these events. And now, when the similar situation has arisen, we must solve the problem of energy saving in conditions of the general energy crisis, and that considerably complicates the situation. In 1993, some Western firms, public institutions and organizations of European Commonwealth used to render the technical assistance to the Ukraine. A number of units were built in Kiev, which demonstrated Western and home achievements in this field. The Ukrainian part is represented by the Center of Energy Saving and Construction in these joint projects. In the center, we accumulate all the achievements which are in Ukraine and abroad and try to propagate them as far as possible. That is, first of all, we implement these achievements into our projects. Besides, we publish the information about lost achievements in this sphere in our articles and conduct seminars for specialists. Specialists from the whole Ukraine come to us and we regularly conduct such seminars, where we show and tell them everything we could do. Energy saving program, which the center specialists have elaborated, may save for the country about 33 million of tons of conventional fuel per year. They have proposed 50 methods of the improvement of energy supply in the residential sector. The implementation of such a global program needs educating the great number of specialists. The pilot heat stations, equipped by the modern energy-saving material, are in operation in the capital and will be open soon in regions. And recently, the third international conference, Energy Saving in Buildings and Structures, was held in Kiev, which had a high level of reports and a wide representation. It was visited by specialists from both Eastern and Western countries. Ukraine was represented by the region's leaders and officials of both power branches. Its organizers, however, expected the most important achievements from regions. During the previous conferences, the first one in Poltava, the second one in Chernihiv, participants in general tried to persuade one another that the heat must be saved. Now, the most interesting is the practical implementation of the concrete energy-saving programs. We've prepared the program till 2004. That's the energy-saving program for ourselves. We are realizing it for several years. Today we have a rather real annual profit from this program. In any case, now we pay 30–35% for a season less than we paid at the beginning of this program. That's the real saving. Nowadays we practically paid back all means that we had invested. This year we plan to invest 20,000 more before the beginning of the heating season. We keep in mind that during the very first season we would receive 44,000 of real saving. What does the term quality in designing mean? Are the certification and standardization needed in this sphere? Introduction of certifying standards at any sphere is caused by the state's aspiration to protect its market from goods of poor quality or even dangerous ones. And such standards are compulsory. Meanwhile, the standards exist, which are not compulsory, but they are rather popular among users. That's why the fulfillment of such demands is desirable for the manufacturer. In market conditions, only the saleable product is considered to be high grade. Nowadays, among the design organizations of Ukraine, our institute is the first one which has implemented and certified the system according to the international level. Our certification was conducted by the organization TUF Rhineland-Berlin-Brandenburg, reputed in Europe. In March 1999, the preliminary audit was conducted, which confirmed that the system elaborated by us in accordance with ISO 9001 conforms to the demands of this standard. The Council of Europe, in its resolution 1989, recommended to use these standards as the reference ones. Certification mustn't be regarded as the final result, but rather as the tool or the first step to the overall improvement of the quality management. One cannot attain the perfection. The level of demands to manufacturers would be constantly rising. Accordingly, certifying systems would change. But for the Ukrainian companies which want to enter the world market, such a procedure gives the possibility to ensure the conformity of products with the established requirements. There exist the traditionally outdated methods and approaches to the document's execution, but there are more fastidious customers who demand to put in the technique's knowledge, its possibilities, and its high resolution. The different work and manufacture organizations are required, which would be stipulated by the quality system already implemented in our institute. Formerly, the customer stood in queue for a project design just at this institute. Now somebody considers those times to be gold. Today the institute itself struggles for the customer. But the modern designers do not consider it to be an essential loss. Vice versa, modern relations, that's the norm. And it doesn't seem strange, because the institute looks rather confidently in new market conditions. And all this against the background of the general confusion and pessimism. Probably the secret of the success lies in the fact that the new team came to the manufacture, young specialists not burdened with stereotypes of the Soviet thinking, who from the very childhood were preparing for the work in the conditions of the rigorous competition. Imagine our surprise when we had learned that just the retained old team is the object of the particular pride of the institute administration. By all our staff reductions, the main and the most qualified personnel has remained. We achieved it owing to financing the certain volume of works. as for the reserve for tomorrow. But our leading specialists must work at it right now and work with such an enthusiasm as before. I mean, some budget themes. As a result, we have about 60 specialists of the highest qualification. They are doctors, candidates of science, academicians of different academies, the Academy of Building, Academy of Architecture, laureates of state prizes. How did the Institute succeed in retaining the personnel and the creative potential? It resembles the small lone island of the social stability and the relative prosperity which we keep in mind since Soviet times. As 10 years ago, the personnel received their salary twice a month. The Institute maintains 2 holiday zones, and what is more, the Institute pays the extra pension to the former workers from its own funds. Structures erected by the projects elaborated in Kiev's ZNIIEP are unique not only thanks to successful engineering godsends, which assure their comfort and security. The specialists care for the aesthetic side of the problem. Architects and painters of the Scientific Center of Monumental and Decorative Art, combining the means of architecture, monumental painting and sculpture, elaborate the design of facades and interiors. The most obvious illustration of the center activity may be tremendous panels which decorate foyers of different institutions in Kiev and abroad. Since 1987, the Department of Decorative and Artistic Ceramics has been the organic part of the center. It originates from the little workshop which was created in the 40s at the Academy of Architecture. Mastery secrets are here passed from generation to generation.
Мы сделали небольшое панно для...
We created a panel for our mission of UN in New York. We created a lot of panels and interiors using ceramics and cloth in Kiev. Besides panels, we have ceramic goods which could decorate any office and any hall. For example, the maintenance of the Hotel ZNIIEP restaurant was held, but the wall with our ceramic goods was not disturbed, the only one. Coordination of intellectual forces of the country in the field of construction and cooperating scientific elaborations is realized by the Board of Directors at the State Committee of Building, Architecture and House and Policy of Ukraine. This non-state structure has united the leaders of all scientific and research institutes subordinated to the committee. It has enabled to precipitate the implementation of the committee decisions into practice and simultaneously has brought the scientists closer to the state control level. The scientists committed the director of Kiev's ZNIIEP, ZNIIEP Sheveljov, to be the chairman at the board's meeting. Epoch, which we now live in, demands new concepts. Conditions of the market competition force to look for new decisions to implement effective technologies. Therefore, the society can get rid of everything which is outdated and conservative and acquire modern forms in a good time. The specialists of the Institute are sure that only striving for perfection would allow the national science to become all-sufficient and return the development perspectives.